Hello, Latham Country. Today we are going to talk a little bit about tar spot, as it's been a topic of discussion starting really in the growing season, throughout our harvest, and then definitely during our post-harvest huddles. A lot of questions were around that. So we looked to John, and he went to his product team, both pre-commercial, and to talk a little bit more about tar spot and what we have been doing and what we are currently doing. So today I'd like to welcome John Latham as well as Bob Foley, our pre-commercial manager, to talk a little bit about what we are doing on the tar spot.
Hey, thank you, Amy. Great to be here. And yeah, this is a topic that a lot of people are talking about, reading about in a lot of industry magazines all over the place, and a lot of concern about it right now. So it's a really timely topic. And I think we've been working on diseases like tar spot for many years. So it really fits into what we've been doing, going back to our days with my grandfather and dad involved in the business. Research has always been a real focus for us at Latham High-Tech Seeds. And this tar spot issue is something that we focused on the last several years. We've got a real expert in the industry and Bob Foley here to talk about it. And really excited about what we're doing, investing in research, the products we're coming out. Now, if you've seen some of my videos, you've seen some of the first trial results we're super excited about. But today we're taking a little different direction, talking about some of the disease pressure we're seeing and trying to save people bushels down the line by managing it in the best way possible. So you've seen, this is our Latham Country where we do business. And these are all of our showcase plots, both corn and soybeans, and then our corn elite trials and soybean elite trials. So a lot of different testing goes in. And part of the reason why we've been so successful in the seed business is because we've invested in research and development, and the products come out, not only high yielding products, but products that have really strong disease resistance as well. And tar spot's kind of the latest thing we've really focused on. So I'd like to add Bob Foley into the discussion now.
Good morning.
And so glad to have you here, and this is a great discussion. Do you want to touch on a little bit about the research locations we have, and then some of the focus that we're doing, and how we're getting some breakthrough products?
Sure. Thanks, John. Hello, everybody. As John is pointing out, we have this map that we show pretty repeatedly in our presentations. It's a great display of the investment of our research and our elite trials and anything that's on a commercial, beyond pre-commercial, after pre-commercial status. One of the things we wanted to talk today about is underneath this, underlying all of these plots, is this set of product development locations that we've been coming to use in the breeding program. Nebraska, Alexander, Iowa, Ames, Iowa, Platteville, Wisconsin, which we're going to talk about ad nauseum today. This year we had one at Dyersville, which is located right here. Sioux Falls, South Dakota, which is where I'm based. In the next season, we'll add Olivia and one up by Fargo as well. And you might ask, why does yield happen, or why did my farm do so well even though we had stresses like diseases or droughts? And a lot of it, I think, comes from our ability to use these PD plots to our advantage. When you take a look at a yield trial location over on the left side that John was showing, you might go to this location right here, for example, and it may have a trial at it that has maybe 25 or 30 hybrids. And when somebody does the analysis of that location for a disease, let's say northern corn leaf blight, they're going to have an analysis at that one location for just those 25 hybrids. What we try to do on the right side with these PD plots is take the entire portfolio of everything we're working with, whether it's for sale as an LH through Latham, or it's an experimental that Lyle is looking at in his elite trials, or it's something that we have developed pre-commercial and it's ready to launch. or if it's brand new breeding material that somebody has brought to us or that we've developed internally, we like to put it all into one place. So if you think about it, John, a little bit like Major League Baseball, these are our training facilities. They're our training camps. It's like the AAA of corn. All of the individuals that could eventually become a player in the major leagues on your side of the chart start here in the developmental side. We learn what they're capable of. We learn what they're not capable of. And when you're a customer and you're out here in South Dakota and something worked really well or didn't work really well, and you ask the question, why? These plots are aiding us to identify the why. We use these plots at a given location. For example, at Platteville this year, we had over 400 hybrids and about 100 inbred lines at this Platteville location with a specific task of evaluating tar spot. A benefit was that we also had a great incidence of cold weather early so that we got good emergence notes out of it. We also had a huge impact of northern corn leaf blight here. So they're very valuable. We can take an inbred line that we really like for, let's just use tar spot. And we can cross it with many other lines. And let's say we made 10 hybrids with it. Each one of those hybrids combination is going to improve or decrease its ability on tar spot based on how those two parents combine. And so we learn, does that parent line that we were interested in, is it additive to all other lines for tar spot, or is it something we should move away from? Is it additive for yield? Is it additive for roots? What does this inbred line bring to the table that we need to guard against or utilize more of? And so what we call internally, we call them OBS plots, but some of you have been in a few of them with me. They're really product development sites. And they help us in the breeding side because we get to learn what the inbred lines do on a consistent basis, what they bring to a breeding program. We get to learn how they'll influence a hybrid's disease tolerance or not. And we get to do lots of things, heat stress, production notes. We can cut the stalks. None of these plots are taken for yield. None of these plots have fungicide on them. They're just run like very commercially, like the farmer would run at his farm. If we have cob rots at this location, like this example of at Valley Spring this year, which is by Sioux Falls, we had quite an incidence of kernel molds and pre-kernel germs, and we could track the parent lines or the families that were actually predisposed to those types of cob rots and kernel molds. And John, we walked through a plot out here and talked about how that line of that genetic family rolling through those programs is very evident when you take it apart and you can look at all of the players in the system, in the farm system, and how they might one day come up to be part of the major league team.
Yeah, you've got to have a pipeline of products and moving up through the system, and we're really excited to have that. I was thinking, Bob, this star in Wisconsin was your second home because you spent so much time in Platteville this year, but
Yeah.
but it was time very well spent, and I'm really excited to see some of the output from all your time there.
Yeah, it ended up being, a lot of trips over there, but at the end, it ended up being much worth it. One of the things that those plots help influence is our breeding program as well. And if I might just touch for a second here, while we are always working on the funnels that work inside the Latham marketing territory, and we're not worried about the states like Ohio and Illinois and places where we don't market, we can get a lot of products in from a lot of providers that need to be shoved through our funnels so that we find what fits for us in Minnesota and Iowa and the touch of Wisconsin and the South and North Dakotas. And so to do that, we use winter nurseries and contra-season nurseries. And as you know from other conversations that we've had with the group, We rely a lot on Mexico for a lot of our hybrid creation and a lot of our inbred development programs. And this year we have a couple of hybrid pilots down there so that we can bring some experimental bags of a couple of hybrids back to the crew. We've added a spot in Chile to help with with a new aggressive breeding approach that we've been looking at. We've added a spot in Molokai, Hawaii. Neither Mexico or Chile allows us to do much trait work there. They have banned trait importation and exportation there. So we can go to Molokai, and like the hybrids that we're raising here in Mexico on a conventional basis, we're making seed up of the traded versions here in Molokai. Plus, we also have a little trait conversion program going there. All of this couples along to work with our evaluation sites in Iowa and in South Dakota. In a nutshell, this is all based upon the needs assessment wheel that we so often talk about, anywhere from what you would see at a field day at the Premier Agronomy Center, the work that Phil does in applied agronomics. Here we sit with pre-commercial development and breeding and product development. In contrast, this is where pre-commercial breeding and elite trials meet here in product development with Lyle and I and Doug, and then market development and showcase plots and first trials and brand building on the commercial side where you and Amy reside. And it all kind of circles around this hub of the dealer or the customer telling us, working with us on what their needs are. And so we can work backwards at a PD plot and start with a needs assessment there and work it up through the commercial system.
Yeah, this circle is so important, and the customer is at the center of it all. And the customer last year, especially the last couple of years, but last year was really saying this tar spot thing is spreading. It's becoming worse. I'm more concerned about it. So we've really listened to our customers and invested in testing for tar spot. And yeah, it all goes back to our customer. That's what it's all about for us at Latham.
Yeah, in fact, Lyle was able to point out he had been reading some literature and found a couple of sources of people had identified some tar spot resistance materials from Cuba and Mexico that we were able to access and acquire, and we have them in our Mexican scenario now for trying to isolate the resistance genes. But in the interim, we've been able to do some work on lots of diseases. Now, you said in the last couple of years, the needs assessments has been talking about tar spot, and that is in fact the case, and it's been getting more and more notice in the press. But Lyle will tell you, he and I have worked on this. Since before Lyle came to Latham, we were looking at plots in Wisconsin with tar spot and developing a system of how to rate it and how to evaluate it, and starting to looking at genetics for things that would show us some type of tolerance. If we go back 3 years ago, we started to have a concept of a couple genetic patterns that were providing some tolerance. We could see an elevation in our ratings getting better. And we started to focus in on what is it in that gene pool, what is it in that set of genetics that is actually doing a better job. And then we started to have a conversation of, is one parent enough to make a hybrid be highly tolerant? Or does the combination of the two parents have an additive effect where we can get kind of a big bang of tolerance and get an improved tolerance level? And we found that both are true. We have some inbred lines that are additive to the resistance to tar spot or the tolerance to tar spot, no matter what cross I put them in. And we found that some of the crosses we put them in have this additive bump between the two of them. And we'll show you a couple of those products. Beyond tar spot, these PD plots also offer us an opportunity for some massive northern corn leaf blight lesions. And this happens to be out of the Dyersville plot on the 29th of September, where we caught this on our way over to see the Platteville plot for the 7th time this year. So I just thought it's interesting. These plots are just not tar spot plots. I want to be very clear. They're emergence plots or stock quality plots or ear rot plots or whatever. What they aren't, John, is they're not yield trials. We don't
Right.
yield test anything at these plots. All of the materials in these plots are in yield trials elsewhere for the combines and for the product group to go through, but these are really classrooms for us to tear apart. We can cut stalks, we can tear apart shell corn. It's not unusual, as you've seen, to come onto the plot in October and you might see ears laying all over the ground that we've been picking and checking out kernel depth and black layers and kernel molds and diseases. And so the investigation is a hands-on situation where we're always looking for how do we identify the why. So when the farmer asks, why did it not do, or why did it do? We also have a why as to why do we want to use it? What is it bringing to our lineup? What is the parent line bringing to the hybrids we're crossing? And so we spend a great deal of time in these PD plots because they're the basis of that needs assessment.
Yeah, so on the left, it looks like we've got pretty severe tar spot, and on the right, we've got northern leaf blight and tar spot, right?
Right.
Bob?
Right. And yeah, and we
Everybody's
saw that a
worst
lot.
nightmare.
I'm sorry.
That's everybody's worst nightmare.
Yeah. Yeah. The only thing we're missing is some goss, and we just
Yeah.
probably weren't far enough south, but these are some major northern lesions. And if you look at this leaf back here in the background, that's all kind of faded out, that's all northern that has smoked that leaf. So we've had some impressive disease capabilities and ability to score a lot of things. But when you think about an inbred line at one of these locations, and it's in 5 or 10 different hybrid combinations, you quickly learn this is an inbred that's bringing me something or not bringing me something. And we need to learn how to harness it and use it to our advantage in hybrid creation. So that's the message here. Our goal, of course, is to have clean, spotless, healthy, good standing hybrids. This is the 30th of September. This is taken in Platteville. And we had quite a disease infestation for tar spot and some northern there as well. But what we've come across in the last couple of years is kind of building on a concept about how we discuss tar spot. I like to think that there's a lot of people that have a little bit of tar spot, and there's quite a bit of drama with it, John, right? I mean, you've been at meetings and you're talking to other people in the seed industry, and I mean, it is the buzzword, even in South Dakota, where people haven't seen it yet. They're talking tar spot. And I think it's really important that everybody take a reality check and think about what level of tar spot they have. So very rarely have we walked a cornfield in the last 3 years that didn't have northern corn leaf blight in it. But most farmers don't know that. They've taken to accept it. They have some gray leaf spot in their farm, and they've taken to accept it. This is going to be the case with tar spot in a lot of cases. Everybody's going to have some, and most of it isn't going to be devastational. And so I've been thinking about a rating system for the disease incidence. And of course, this is from the Firemen's Association, or fire people that put out fires. Anyway, there's red is your hottest and most alarming disease incidence, and blue where it's there, but maybe not as big of a deal, and you can put this out with a fire extinguisher. So we're going to talk about this in context back to the baseball example. When you're in the regular season, almost any pitcher can pitch a couple games and get you through the regular season. But when you come to the playoffs of the World Series and you're getting up into the intensity of what's going on, you have fewer and fewer players that you're going to rely on to get you through that very, very important game. And I think in the context of tar spot or northern or gray, we've always gone through this evaluation. And now that we've seen some genetics that have some tolerance levels to it, it's time that we start to pull this out of the closet and say, let's talk about the severity of the infestation that you have and what is pertinent for you to use. It would make no sense to bring a fire truck, to a one log fire. And so we want to make sure that we're putting the water at the appropriate place and using the appropriate amounts. So what we did is at our locations at Alexander, the PD plots at Alexander, Dyersville, and Platteville all had a level of tar spot. We also had a yield trial in Grafton, which is to the northeast of you, John, about an hour, I would guess.
Mm-hmm.
So if I take those locations and talk about this top line, location disease intensity, and I put it on a 1 to 100, where 100 is the heaviest infestation I've seen, and 1 would be 0 to no infestation at all. We had tar spot at Alexander. Bill mentioned it during field days when we were at the Premier Agronomy Center. Some of the customers mentioned it when we were talking at different spots at the tour. Overall, our yield trial there would be rated about a 30. So less than, not a major concern of tar spot, certainly not a damaging concern of tar spot. And you can see that as we rate our materials at Alexander, we were better than average for our tolerance. The hybrids, all the hybrids that we rated were better than average in our tolerance to that level of tar spot infestation, which would tell you almost any hybrid you have is going to be better than average when you have some tar spot or a little tar spot. When we went to Dyersville or Grafton, we go to Grafton, it was a smaller location. We had a few yield trial plots up there. Some of the developmental plots were there, and Lyle had some elite trials there. But when we scored those, overall, we're sitting pretty well in the middle of our infestation intensity. And our scoring started to go towards a 5. A 3 is, a 1 to 5 scale, 3 is average. And the lineup would be like everybody's lineup. As we get more intensity, our ability to tolerate tar spot or do a good level of tolerance starts to get worse. We go to Dyersville, which is just on Highway 20 straight east and over towards Dubuque. And we got just a lift up to about a 60% infestation level. So this is a number that you can see pretty often, 60 to 70% intensity on the tar spot level. Our ratings ended up not getting a heck of a lot worse, but they did get worse at a 3.19. The interesting part was when I go to Platteville. When we go to Platteville, and this place was on fire. The farmer had surrounded us with his hybrid, and 3 weeks earlier, there was hardly a spot in the field. And when we came to do the assessment, he was absolutely covered in it. And we got into our plot and our total plot, and I said we were like at 400 and some hybrids. And I think there was 100 and some inbreds there. But all in all together, we went to a 3.6 on our average scoring. Now, you could say, well, that's not very good. I look at it different. Under high intensity of tar spot, to have a 3.6 is much better than being a 5, is much better than being a 4. In fact, what it tells me is we have some products that are pretty good because it held that number close to a 319 and didn't let it get out of control at a 4.5 or a 4.6. And so this is telling us, hey, we've got some material that's doing a pretty good job in these heavy tar spot incidences. It's also interesting to note that, and I think I've tried to lead to this conversation, but all of the hybrids that do good at this level of a 30 incidence level do not translate to a 90 level. But the inverse is true. All of the 90 level good performing hybrids will translate back to a lower level. So in other words, excuse me, there's hybrids that'll be just fine in these boxes here, and with with a decent fungicide program, the farmer can plant that racehorse hybrid and get through it and do just fine. But as we go up towards a more intense game, you want to bring your best players to the table.
Yeah, Bob, I know we're going to be talking about some of the higher infestation and what to do about it, but I know there's a lot of people out there that are like in the Alexander situation where they're maybe at a 30% infestation. They've seen it in their fields and they're concerned about it. What are the odds for them that it next year they become a 50 or a 60, or is it all weather related for the most part?
Well, I think there's a few things. You know, you want to be prudent with what you got going on. So we can show you a map here in a little bit. If you've never had it, then I would prepare to have, you know, fungicides at the ready and spend some time walking your fields, and we can do a little bit more guidance on what you should look for when you do your field. But I would caution everybody that being alarming because of a spot here or there is not what we're trying to do. You know, every field you're in has gray, every field you're in has northern, every field has a flea leaf beetle for Stewart's bacterial wilt. I mean, these things are living in nature, and this is going to happen. Now, the weather and the variety that you plant and paying poor attention to a fungicide program will eventually catch up to you. We've had years where we've had high intensity, you know, in the past 6 years in Platteville, we've had high intensity tar spot. Followed the next year where we can't hardly find a fleck based on the weather. Now this year we had, if you recall, you know, the August, September timeframe, it was very cool in the evenings. We were having a lot of dews in the mornings, and it just made multiple weeks of that type of weather was just fantastic for getting this tar spot to go. And it was an odd type of fall. For as dry as we were, there was quite a bit of tar spot incidents happening. And depending on where you lived, you maybe had, you know, a level that was lower and never moved after that because you were dry. So I can't say here that here's your formula, A plus B
Right.
plus C means yes.
Right.
It doesn't seem to work that way. Unfortunately, I wish it did, but it's kind of like saying, you know, should I plant now because it's going to snow next week and some of this other stuff. It's going to become a part of the farming vernacular. And what we can do is try to be prepared and do the best we can. And so one thing we don't want to do, we don't want to be alarming. So this was on Twitter in August. Here's somebody in Zumbrota saw tar spot, and you can see a little fleck here and a little fleck there, and concerned enough about it to say, hey, I got tar spot, and they put it on Twitter. And of course it goes into the tar spot spotter program, and so that's a beneficial tool, but you have to realize the people that are putting information into the tar spotter might be a little bit more alarmed about some of the things they're having. If you've never seen it and all you've done is hear about it, and then you get this in your field, I get it. You can be kind of distraught about what might happen, and you probably should be. But you also have to have an eye on practicality when you think about these infestation levels and what's going on. And it's not just your farm, but the neighbor's farm as well.
So is it fair to say, Bob, if you're in Alexander or Zumbrota, to plant the very best product for your acre? I mean, just and worry about that. Obviously, stand by with the fungicide, but
Yeah,
you don't have to.
Excuse me. I think you know, there's a we're getting to that advent now in this disease profile where for the last few years we've tried to racehorse past the disease intensity. And so we're planting the highest yielding hybrids we can find, putting some fungicide on it, and hoping we can out yield the loss. And that has worked for a few. But now that we're starting to identify tolerances and some really great tolerances, and I'll show you in a minute, it makes a little bit of sense to be pretty judicious with your fields and your acres and your rotational plan to put some genetics on your side that are going to get you through this disease. Because when you get up in these plus 60 environments, it's devastation. And when you get to a 90, this guy, this farmer, got through the 90 just fine because the disease, like I said, came in, October 5th or October 1st. His crop was made when he got hammered with this. But if this started 30 days prior to that, he'd have had a mess on his hands. So we want to use the right hybrids for the right situation and not give up on high yielding hybrids. Not that these hybrids are low yielding, but it's kind of like we go through with some of the technologies that we have to guard against white mold and stuff in soybeans, right? You're guarding against a disease so you can have a crop, and you want to pick the highest yielding varieties that carry those tolerances along with it. Okay.
Yep.
Here we have slides of leaves that were taken from the Platteville location. On the far right, we have what we would call a 5 on a 1 to 5 scale. This is dead.
Wow.
On the left side, we have one of our experimentals. It's a 1. Now, I'm going to come back to this and we'll talk about this. And so they go in order. This is a 2. This is a 3. This is a 4. This is a 5. All of these, 1 through 5, need fungicide. We're not saying we have a magic bullet. We're not saying we have total resistance. What we're saying is we've got some really good tolerance and some really nice products. And if you support them with a good fungicide program, you can have some good success. These hybrids that have these genetics that give you a 3 or a 4 or a 5 and a heavy, now remember, this was a 90 on our 100 scale, right, and a heavy infestation, even fungicide alone is not going to handle these infestation levels. You need the combination, the 1-2 punch of good genetics and a good fungicide program. Here you would see a 2. Most 2s and a majority of 3s you're going to get by with fungicide and your normal hybrids that you're planting now. You're going to have some luck on your side with weather, and the timing of infestation is a problem that you can't do too much about. But if you haven't had it yet, or you've just started to see a few flecks like that Zumbrota picture, then I would say expect to be a 2, expect to be a 3, have a fungicide, maybe take your corn on cornfield and use one of the tolerant hybrids that we'll show you. But at the end of the day, we're trying to avoid 4s and 5s, and you can only do that with genetics and fungicide.
So Bob, did we spray any fungicide on these?
No, none of the PD plots and the majority of our yield trials that for Lyle or for the breeding group do not have fungicides applied to them.
That's some big genetic differences there if we're not seeing any fungicides. What
you're seeing is all genetic. There's 0 fungicides on here. In fact, most of the plots don't even have insecticide on them. A lot of the seed that we bring out of Mexico, we don't even put seed treatment on it before it goes to trials. We just plant it without, because we're trying to have all of the bad things happen in our plots so that they don't happen in your plots. But if I'm going to go to Platteville and spend all the time evaluating for tar spot, the last thing I want to do is put something in that plot that wards off tar spot. So no applications.
Impressive.
Be a bad day for the chemical company if it had been. Yeah.
Well, it's amazing how you go hunt for that disease to figure out what we can and can't do. So that's impressive. The pictures say 1,000 words.
Yeah, thank you. I think the PD plots are really critical for this. To be able to bring this in is because we've looked and looked and looked and started to winnow down our pile. This isn't unlike, somebody with a good cattle herd who's been culling his way to a successful beef herd. And so the process is much the same. So what we have here on the left would be our picture of the 3. Here's a different picture of a 5. And I just wanted to expand this 5 to you. I want you to know this is survivable. This 3 is something we can get through with fungicide and maybe better genetics and good timing. This 5, if it comes in early enough, is what the devastation is about. So if you're the picture that's got the one fleck or the two flecks and you've never seen it before, this is why there's so much drama, and valid drama behind the topic of tar spot.
Is this the same field or how close?
Same field.
Same field.
Wow.
Same field. Yeah. In fact, that picture of this one, all of these were within 200 feet of each other. I mean, it took no time at all to walk into the field and say, here's a 1, here's a 5, here's a 3, here's a 4, here's a 2.
Holy cow.
So you realize our plots are, 2 or 4 row, 20 feet long or 40 feet long. So we can put a whole bunch, we can put like 600 hybrids in an acre. And so this is the kind of material that we can look at lots of material in 1 or 2 acres when we do a plot like this. Okay. It is cool, Amy, that when you see a hybrid like this 5 sitting next to the hybrid that's a 1 and their leaves are touching, banging on each other as the wind blows, and the 1 just stands there. It's just fine.
That's amazing.
It is. It really, I mean, again, the pictures say 1,000 words. This is just insane.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I feel bad. We've been playing with this for 5 or 6 years, and we're just now getting to a point where we can say, you know what, I think we've got something.
Right.
And this one's been tough. I worked hard on gloss when I was with BASF, and we were able to find hybrids just naturally had some tolerances very quickly. But this has been a bit of a chore, and now I think we're really sitting on good footing where we can really do something valuable with what we're learning on this whole scale. So here's a couple hybrids that are from that Platteville site. LH 5209. John, you can talk about 5209, and then there's an experimental here, and there's about 15 experimental hybrids over there that look like this. You'll notice there's a little fleck right here on the corner of this one, and there's a fleck up here on these leaves. It's getting a little bit of northern. You see the northern leaf blight coming in. Northern's going to be a bigger problem for this hybrid than tar spot, actually. Over on this side, John, and please talk about the 5209. You can see these flecks that are popping around in here. None of them have the halo circle. None of them are growing. Here's a little growth on some dead tissue, from where a corn rootworm beetle had scratched the surface off of the leaf. That's what that is. And so it kind of likes to grow on that necrotic dead tissue. But maybe you guys can talk about 5209 just for a second.
Yeah, 5209, it's in its 2nd year out in the Latham lineup. It's a Duracade Viptera product, 102-day, and there's still some available, but I have a feeling it's going to go pretty fast after seeing these pictures. But yeah, it's in the Latham lineup right now. The one on the right is an experimental that we're excited about, conventional experimental that, and we've got several others like this moving through the lineup. So excited about the future there.
Yeah. I think so. These both scored 1s, obviously, at Platteville. I mean, you have to say they're 1s. We don't have anything with no flex on it. I've never seen a infestation at a 90 level of intensity and had anything better than a 2. We were thrilled with the number of 1s we had. And this is one of those additive hybrids where the female and the male both together increased each other's tolerances when it came to it. This shares a family in common with those. And so the message here is they still got flex, guys. There's a fungicide need here, and you're not going to be able to walk away from it just by planting these higher tolerant hybrids.
Well, and these don't have fungicide on it, right?
They don't.
So that will add some additional.
That's correct. The plots have no fungicide, as we've stated. I just am trying to say that I just don't think we should recommend to anybody that they're done putting on fungicide.
Right.
Very good.
Bob, what do you think about maturity? I've heard some people say they want to get earlier products to beat the tar spot. Others say later products for more health. What do you think?
Well, I can show you a lot of pictures, and I don't have them prepared for this, but I can show you hybrids all the way up to 64, 77 for us. And their tolerance levels are more in that 4 box at this location at Platteville and at the Dyersville location. So later hybrids have not shown the case to be influential on this. It's genetics.
It's genetics. Okay.
It's genetics. On the earlier side, I could almost get behind the idea of plant it early to beat it and get ahead of it. Kind of like they do, like in Kentucky and Tennessee, they plant a 140 hybrid for an early harvest to beat the heat. For those guys, they're opening up a grain leg, and they have markets they want to deliver seed to or grain to, you know. But there is so much data in our arsenal about switching to early hybrids and the loss of yield by doing it. This is the same conversation where we get these wet springs and guys want to start switching hybrids right away. And we're just like hanging on to the reins saying, you're giving up the 8 bushel every time you move 2 days. You're
Right.
giving up the chance. I get that you're going to be wet, but you know what? You're going to be wet anyway. Why not be
Right.
wet and heavy? And so,
Right.
and I think the guys in the north will tell you that is starting to prove itself out the more and more people that do it. But I don't like switching maturities for any reason. And I don't think it's going to be prudent on this. What we want to do is I'd rather plant a racehorse hybrid and try to out yield the disease of the appropriate maturity than to plant an earlier hybrid and give up the yield.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, we're seeing more and more guys moving later products into northern Iowa and southern Minnesota all the time. We had a 112-day win first trial in southern Minnesota, so they're definitely yielding, and you hate to give that up.
Yeah. Now, going to the later because you might get it in and it has a lot more yield in it would be kind of the out yielding racehorse conversation. So I can get behind it. I just think we're getting to the advent where healthy products are going to be kind of the strategy going forward.
Right.
So in a nutshell, this is the hybrid we were looking at on the original slide. This happens to be the 2 rows of that experimental we were just showing you. To do this, the message we want to send is that we focus on the hybrids that have the stability for diseases. Naturally picking hybrids that just naturally have very good health to them can help you a lot. If you're in that 3-4 box, if you're picking hybrids with great health packages, maybe just not tar spot, but just healthy in general, great fall standability, harvest, eye appeal, you're going to help yourself. If you pick hybrids that have high disease tolerances or give you a good rating for specific diseases like tar spot or northern corn leaf blight, that'll help you. A fungicide plan has to be part of it. It's not an option. And we would recommend that you use multiple modes of action. That MOA cannot be consistent. Tar spot has to be attacked from several different positions. It takes more people to tackle this. There are more fungicides to tackle this than just one. So if you're able to align healthy hybrids or have a tar spot tolerant hybrid, and you put multiple modes of action on it, you can come through this and be pretty unscathed, where everything we've modeled out and everything we're predicting would tell us. All of that in consideration, you need to take a thought about your intensity map, what the heat is for you, what your neighbors have had. Seed World magazine had this map the other day. that I thought was pretty fair. You know, the orange states are more of a higher risk. That doesn't mean everybody here has had tar spot. There's quite a bit of people in Minnesota and Iowa and Illinois have never seen this disease. But because it's coming out of these two areas and it's moving its way this way and moving its way this way, it's doing exactly what we've been projecting for the past 2 seasons, John, as we've talked to dealers at meetings. This is happening and it's moving to the west at, you know, some years at an alarming rate. If it's a moist, wet year and we got a lot of stuff going on, this thing could move pretty quickly. But if you're in the green zone and you haven't had it yet, this is like a little like the COVID conversation. If you haven't had COVID yet, just hang on. You're probably going to get it. And
Right.
I hope we can get the breeding ahead of the spread. I think we've made a great stride in the last couple of years and look forward to showing you some of these products this summer. But at the end of the day, this is about being prepared for this to happen, picking your products judiciously. Don't spend a lot of time on your fields that aren't in this pathway yet and doing a lot of things, but be ready to put in fungicide on them. And, you know, in a nutshell, it's just another day of farming for everybody, right?
Farmers are used to this. They've been, everything in the book's been thrown at them. So
Yeah,
just
expecting the
manage it like you
unexpected
do
is,
other issues.
sorry, John. Expecting the unexpected is really what farming is going to be about, especially when it comes to tar spot. And you just really need to focus on your return on investment now with these added costs. So I would encourage everybody to not be alarming. Be pretty consistent with their analysis. Where does their farm sit on the heat map? And what has their intensity been at their neighbors? And am I doing corn on corn? Maybe I should stop doing that a little bit. And should I pick my hybrids so that it's prudent with the type of infestation levels I'm projecting to have or that I've had in the past, and react that way and work your way into this rather than just throw 5209 on every acre and go buy the best fungicides you can find. And pretty soon ROI is something you can never talk about.
Right. Well, I sure like ending on this picture than some of the other ones you showed with tar spot and northern, but this is a good way to end it. And thanks so much for this great information.
Absolutely.
Yeah, this is fantastic. If you out there have questions, give us a call at 877-GO-LATHAM, and we can put you through to somebody on our product team, one of our agronomists, or regional sales managers, or even your local dealer. And then we've got so much information on lathamseeds.com. Look us up there. All the different yield results are on there. So we'd love to have you check us out there, or certainly you can get a hold of one of us too if you have questions. So, all right. Thanks so much, Bob. Thank you, Amy.
You're welcome.
Thanks everybody for watching, and we'll have more information on this again soon, I'm sure. So thanks everybody.